In the grand tapestry of life, nothing is by chance. If you're reading this, watching this video, or reflecting on these words, know that it is not a random occurrence, but a deliberate step on your journey. God, in His infinite wisdom, has guided you to this very moment, unveiling a truth woven into the fabric of your existence since before your birth. Every experience, every challenge, and even the seemingly insignificant memories of your childhood are not mere accidents. They are the early signs of a divine purpose unfolding. You are being called to recognize that your life has been meticulously designed, each moment, each struggle, each triumph leading you toward a higher calling. This divine blueprint, crafted with love and foresight, has been unfolding since the beginning, preparing you for something extraordinary. Embrace this realization and trust that your journey is far from random. Your life is part of a greater divine plan. The divine plan, a journey toward understanding your purpose. It is no mere coincidence that you are reading these words right now. In the grand tapestry of existence, woven through time and space by the hands of an all-knowing Creator, every moment, every thought, and every step you take has been guided by a divine purpose. It's easy to believe that our lives are a series of random events, but to think so is to overlook the deeper, more profound truth. You are here for a reason. God, in His infinite wisdom, has led you to this very moment, not by chance, but because there is something you are meant to discover, something powerful about who you are, why you are here, and the journey you must take. Since before the foundation of the world, before you even drew your first breath, there has been a purpose set in motion just for you. Just as the Creator formed the stars in the sky, He also carefully shaped the course of your life, ensuring that you would encounter certain people, face specific challenges, and grow through unique experiences. You were never lost in the sea of time. Your life, your very being, is part of a divine plan that has always been unfolding ever since you were a child. The struggles, joys, and moments of doubt have been threads woven into your story to lead you closer to understanding your greater purpose. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." These words echo the divine truth that we are not alone in this world, and that God's plans for us are always filled with hope. Even in times of uncertainty, we may not always see the path clearly, but we must trust that it has been designed with purpose. Consider the story of Moses, a child, abandoned and left to drift down the river, raised in the palace of Pharaoh, and yet destined to lead an entire nation to freedom. It was not by accident that Moses was spared from death as an infant. His survival, his education in Pharaoh's court, his exile in the desert, all were steps in a journey meticulously planned by God. At the time, Moses may have wondered why he faced such hardship, but in hindsight, he could see how each part of his story contributed to the larger purpose. And it was through his faith and obedience that God's plan for the liberation of His people was fulfilled. This same truth applies to you. In the moments of your life that feel uncertain or difficult, remember that God is not distant. He is close, guiding you. The things you have been through, the lessons you have learned, are all part of a grand design that is meant to shape you for something far greater than you may realize. You are not a bystander in your own life, but an active participant in a divine narrative. Your life's purpose is not merely to exist or to follow a path of least resistance. It is to understand your role in God's kingdom and to step into that purpose with courage. The Apostle Paul wrote in Ephesians, "For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." Each day is an opportunity to live out the purpose that God has prepared for you, an invitation to partner with Him in fulfilling His plan for your life. And just as God revealed His plan to great leaders like Moses, David, and Esther, He is revealing His plan for you. It may not always come in a grand or dramatic moment, but in the still whisper of His Spirit. He speaks through the events of your life, the people you meet, and the dreams and desires that stir within you. Pay attention to how God guides you, for He is always speaking and leading you toward your destiny. What you are experiencing in this moment, your thoughts, struggles, and triumphs, are not accidents. They are the gentle nudges of a loving Creator who patiently draws you toward a greater understanding of your purpose. Whether at a crossroads, in a season of waiting, or moving forward with clarity, know that God's hand is upon you. His plans for you are good and will unfold at just the right time. The question now is not whether you have a purpose, for you do. The question is whether you are willing to step into it, trust in God's timing, and follow the path He has set before you. Your life is part of something much larger, a divine plan that stretches across time and eternity. The more you align yourself with His will, the more you will discover the fullness of your purpose, and in doing so, you will find a peace that surpasses all understanding. So take a moment now to listen in the quiet of your heart. Ask God to reveal to you what He has already set in motion. Trust that He has been preparing you for this moment and that your journey is unfolding as it should. And know this: you are not here by accident. You are here for a divine purpose, which is beautiful beyond your wildest imagination. The Hidden Path: Reflections of a Divine Journey. As a child, the world was a vast and unfamiliar, teeming with adventures, mysteries, and what now seems like an endless parade of trivialities. I remember one particular afternoon, sitting on the old wooden swing in my grandmother's backyard, my feet barely brushing the grass. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, and for some reason, I felt a strange sense of calm, as if the world, in its gentle rhythm, was whispering something profound to me. At that time, it was a fleeting moment, forgotten in the rush of childhood. Yet, retrospectively, I wonder if that moment wasn't more significant than I could ever have imagined. It was neither the swing special, nor the way the breeze made the branches sway. It was something deeper, a sense of presence, like an unseen hand guiding me, even when I couldn't comprehend it. Looking back, it now seems that God, in His infinite wisdom, was planting seeds in my heart long before I understood the divine nature of my journey. How many of us, as children, feel those first stirrings of something greater, a vague sense that we are meant for something beyond the ordinary? But it is only with time and reflection that we understand those quiet moments as divine whispers. I remember my parents taking me to church every Sunday, the familiar smells of old wood and incense filling the air. The sermons often seemed like distant echoes, meaning elusive to my young mind. Yet, a particular story in the Bible captured my attention, one that would follow me through the years like a shadow I could never shake off. It was the story of David and Goliath. At first glance, it seemed like a tale of courage and triumph. But as I grew older, I realized it was more. It was a story of divine selection, of God's choice of the unlikely hero. David, the shepherd boy, who his brothers overlooked, was chosen by God to do what no one else could. That story had a peculiar resonance, a sense that David's path had been set long before he faced Goliath. It wasn't just a moment of courage that defined him. It was a lifetime of small, seemingly insignificant events leading up to that great moment. The same could be said of my own life. The moments that seemed trivial in the grand scheme of things, the hours spent in quiet solitude, the little acts of kindness, the whispers of my heart that felt like nothing more than a passing thought, were the foundations of something greater. I, like David, was being prepared for a purpose beyond my understanding. How often do we, as children, dismiss our seemingly insignificant experiences? How often do we ignore the whisper of God's calling because it doesn't seem urgent or important? Yet, those memories, the fleeting moments, are not random. They are the threads woven into the tapestry of our divine destiny. It is only later, when we look back, that we begin to see the intricate patterns forming, the path that was always there, even when we were too young to understand. In the words of C.S. Lewis, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." Just as David was called from the fields to face a giant, we are called, often without warning, to confront the challenges and giants of our own lives. But we cannot meet them unless we recognize the divine preparation that has been taking place all along. As a child, I never understood the deeper significance of those early experiences, but now as an adult, I see them for what they truly were, small glimpses of the divine hand guiding me all along. Those memories, once seemingly insignificant, are proof that God has been preparing me for something greater from the very beginning. And just as David was chosen to face Goliath, I too have been chosen to face the giants in my life. In some way, we are all like David, small in stature, but chosen for something much greater than ourselves. Our paths are not random. They are carefully crafted by a God who sees the bigger picture, even when we cannot. What may seem like a trivial childhood memory could be the key to unlocking our divine purpose. As we grow, we begin to see that nothing is wasted, and that every moment and experience has been a part of the grand design. We must continue to awaken the joy, and every moment and experience has been a part of the grand design. Looking back at that childhood moment on the swing, I now understand that it was not just the setting sun that provided peace, but the quiet assurance that I was not alone in my journey. God was with me then, just as He is with me now, guiding me every step of the way. And though the path may seem unclear at times, I have learned to trust that the memories of my past were not random. They were divine whispers, leading me toward my true purpose. So, let us all look back at our childhood memories and recognize them for what they truly are: signs of God's gentle guidance, shaping us for the great things He has in store. Just as He chose David, He has chosen each of us for a purpose greater than we can fully understand. And in those quiet, seemingly insignificant moments, we are being prepared for the giants we are destined to face. Divine Blueprint, a journey of divine purpose. Life is not an accidental journey. It is not a random series of events that occur by chance. No, every individual's life is intricately woven into a divine tapestry, a blueprint designed by God Himself. Every moment, every struggle, and every triumph aligns perfectly with the greater mission that He has set before us, whether we realize it or not. We often view our lives as disconnected episodes. We face hardships, make decisions, and pursue goals assuming that everything is happening independently, by pure coincidence or at best, by our efforts. Yet the truth is far more profound than this simplistic view. There is a greater hand at work orchestrating our steps long before we take them. The divine blueprint for our lives has been carefully crafted, and our struggles are part of that design. Each challenge is not a random event, but a piece of a puzzle, a necessary preparation for the calling we were born to fulfill. This divine blueprint has been woven into the fabric of our lives from the very beginning. We see this truth in the story of Joseph, who his brothers sold into slavery. At the time, it seemed his life was spiraling out of control. Still, the narrative reveals that every setback, every betrayal, and every unjust experience was part of God's larger plan to position Joseph in a place of influence. Through his trials, Joseph was being prepared for his ultimate mission, saving his family and countless others from famine. His journey was not a series of random misfortunes, but a purposeful progression that led him to a divine destiny. Likewise, we observe the story of Moses. Raised in Pharaoh's house, Moses' early years seemed marked by privilege, but his destiny lay in a different direction, one of challenge and exile. He fled Egypt, questioning his purpose, yet all the while God was preparing him for the monumental task of leading the Israelites out of bondage. His time in the wilderness, though painful, was not wasted. It was during these years that Moses discovered his true calling. Had he not endured the struggles in the desert, he would not have been ready to take on the monumental task ahead. Like Joseph's, his story reveals a truth that is often difficult to see in the moment, that our hardships are not in vain. The same is true for each of us. The struggles we face, the insurmountable difficulties, and the relationships that test us are not without purpose. They are part of the divine blueprint God has designed for us. Just as Joseph and Moses were prepared for their unique missions through years of difficulty, so are we, being prepared for something greater than we could ever imagine. Sometimes it may seem as if our lives are defined by failure or disappointment, but what if these moments are simply the shaping of our character? What if, like a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble, God is refining us, into something more beautiful and capable of fulfilling his divine purpose. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote in Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Every moment in our lives, no matter how insignificant or painful it may seem, is working toward a greater good and fulfilling the divine blueprint God has set for us. Consider the words of Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9, where God declares, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts." What we perceive as random events or unforeseen difficulties are in fact part of God's infinitely greater plan. His understanding surpasses ours, and his purpose for our lives is far grander than we hope to grasp. But how do we align ourselves with this divine plan? How can we ensure that our actions and choices contribute to the fulfillment of God's blueprint? The key lies in trusting the process and surrendering our desires for control. When we trust in God's wisdom and guidance, we begin to see that even in the most challenging moments, a deeper purpose unfolds. Just as a seed must first be buried in the darkness of the soil before it can sprout and grow, so must we sometimes endure periods of uncertainty and struggle before we realize our true potential. The journey is not always easy, but it is always purposeful. Each step we take, no matter how difficult, is part of the preparation for the unique mission we were destined to fulfill. Like Joseph and Moses, our challenges are not obstacles to our purpose. They are the very means by which God prepares us for the work he has set before us. We are part of a divine story that is far bigger than ourselves, and every moment, every relationship, and every trial is carefully crafted to bring us closer to the fulfillment of that story. So, the next time you face a challenge or question your purpose, remember this: your life is not a random series of events. You are part of a divine blueprint, a plan that stretches far beyond what you can see. Trust in the process and know that God is working all things together for your good, preparing you for a higher calling. Divine design, the masterstroke of God's hand. In the grand scheme of life, we are a part of something far greater than we can often perceive. God, the creator of the universe, has designed every moment of our existence with intentionality and purpose, weaving a tapestry of events that shape who we are. From the moment we take our first breath to the very last, our lives unfold according to a divine plan that is as intricate and mysterious as it is purposeful. Even the seemingly mundane or insignificant moments of childhood, the briefest encounters, and the minor struggles we face are all threads in the larger fabric of God's design. Consider the story of Joseph, the son of Jacob, whose life is an extraordinary example of divine design at work. Born into a family filled with jealousy and rivalry, Joseph's journey was hardship, betrayal, and suffering. At first glance, a series of unfortunate events seemed to mark his life. His brothers sold him into slavery, and he endured the loneliness of captivity in a foreign land. Yet, as we look deeper into his story, we realize that every trial and setback was part of a grand plan. Had Joseph not been sold into slavery, he would never have risen to prominence in Egypt, and the salvation of his family during a time of famine would have remained impossible. Joseph recognized the divine design in his life when he declared to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Genesis 50:20. The same God who saw fit to place him in the pit also led him to the palace. This story teaches us that God's hand is not absent in times of suffering, but that suffering itself often plays a pivotal role in fulfilling God's greater purpose. It is easy to believe that we are merely drifting through life, subject to the whims of fate or chance. Yet, in the silence of our reflections, we begin to notice that the most important people, events, and challenges of our lives were never random. Even the smallest encounters, like a chance meeting with a mentor or an unexpected word of encouragement from a stranger, are part of God's divine design. The relationships we form, the lessons we learn, and the struggles we face are all carefully orchestrated to guide us toward a greater purpose. Take for instance the story of David, a young shepherd boy chosen to be king over Israel. From an outward perspective, David's life seemed unremarkable. He was the youngest of his brothers, overlooked and underestimated by all except God. Yet, in the quiet solitude of the fields, David learned the virtues of courage, patience, and faithfulness. There, alone with the sheep, he developed the skills that would later serve him as a leader who would not only defeat Goliath, but unite a nation under God's reign. David's rise to kingship was not an accident, but a deliberate unfolding of God's plan. And this same truth holds for each of us. God has designed every struggle, success, and failure to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the unique purpose He has for us. God's plan for our lives is not confined to our victories or moments of joy. It is equally present in our defeats, doubts, and trials. When we understand that our lives are not the result of chance, but divine orchestration, we begin to see the hand of God in every aspect of our existence. We understand that God's design is not only concerned with the grand moments, but also with the quiet, everyday occurrences that often go unnoticed. The quiet whisper of the Holy Spirit, the small act of kindness from a friend, or even the hardship that seems unbearable at the time, are how God shapes our hearts and guides our steps toward His eternal purpose. This truth should give us profound comfort and hope. When life feels uncertain or overwhelming, we can rest in knowing that we are not lost in a random world. We are part of a divine design that began long before our birth and will continue into eternity. Each day we are being shaped, molded, and prepared for the extraordinary work God has set before us. Our lives are not ordinary. They are a masterpiece in the making, crafted by the hands of the Creator. In moments of doubt or frustration, we must remember the words of Isaiah. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Jeremiah 29:11. Trust in this divine design, for it is perfect and unshakable, a blueprint for our lives, drawn by the one who holds the universe in His hands. Every step, every moment, every breath, each is part of a larger, sacred story that God is unfolding, and we are invited to play a vital role in it. The strength found in trials, a journey to purpose. In the grand narrative of God's eternal plan, adversity is not an enemy, but a necessary companion. We often view hardship as something that threatens to shatter us, as an unwelcome force that disrupts the smooth course of our lives. Yet, for those who walk in faith, there is a deeper truth, a truth embedded within the very fabric of Scripture, that God is shaping us for a greater purpose. His intention is never for us to break, but to grow stronger, more resilient, and more capable of carrying out the divine mission ahead. Consider the childhood of David, the future king of Israel. As a young shepherd, he was not spared from the harsh realities of life. His family saw him as the least significant, a mere boy tending to sheep in the fields, while his brothers prepared for greater roles in the army. Yet, in the solitude of those fields, God was doing something profound in David's heart. The quiet days of tending to sheep, the roaring lions, and the bears that threatened his flock were not merely challenges to overcome. In David's story, we see a pattern that emerges repeatedly throughout the Bible, the pattern of trial and triumph. The Apostle Paul offers another striking example. Shipwrecks, imprisonments, and beatings marked his life. Yet, amid these adversities, he did not falter in his mission to spread the gospel. He grew stronger. Paul's letters reflect on how suffering produces perseverance, and how perseverance leads to character. Satan recently changed his name, even died mortally wounded. He made the pathway strong, the coast the shape of an adversary. He calls the way of the seers. We also glory in our sufferings, Paul wrote to the Romans, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. Romans 5:3a-4. This sequence is no accident. Through the trials we endure, God shapes us into the people He has called us to be. It is easy to overlook the lessons that hardship teaches. We might be tempted to question God in moments of pain or confusion. Why me, we ask? Why this? But in the Bible, God's answer is always a quiet yet firm reminder. This is not to break you, but to make you. The trials you face are the training grounds for the future mission He has prepared for you. Like gold being refined in a fire, you are being shaped into something stronger and more valuable. In moments of suffering, we are often tempted to look for escape, for ways to avoid the discomfort. Yet God's invitation is not to escape, but to endure with Him. The greatest lessons are often learned in the depths of hardship. We find courage when we face the impossible, not because we are strong in ourselves, but because we rely on the strength God provides. The same God who delivered David from the paw of the lion and the bear, who gave Paul the grace to endure prison, is the same God who walks with us through our trials. The character God is building in us will not crumble under pressure, but one that will stand firm in faith and hope. It is a character that has been tested and refined by the fire of adversity. This strength, however, is not for our glory, but for God's purposes. Through the strength He builds in us, we are equipped to fulfill the mission He has entrusted us. One of the most profound truths of the Christian faith is that God does not waste our suffering. Every challenge, every heartache, every setback is part of His divine plan to prepare us for greater things. The struggles of today will prepare us for the victories of tomorrow. As we reflect on our own lives, let us remember the words of Isaiah 40:29. 32 verse 31. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Our strength comes from the Lord. Through His strength we are empowered to fulfill the purpose He has prepared for us. Thus, adversity is not to be feared. It is a signpost, pointing to God's greater calling for our lives. With every challenge, we are being made stronger, more capable, and more attuned to the divine mission that will unfold in our lives. God does not break us through hardship. He builds us. Through adversity, He shapes us into vessels fit for His glory, ready to fulfill His calling on our lives. Divine compassion, the early signs of a larger plan. As children, many of us experience moments that seem small, fleeting, or even insignificant at the time. But when viewed through the lens of divine purpose, these moments of compassion, empathy, and sensitivity to the suffering of others can take on a profound significance. From an early age, perhaps when we first noticed a friend's sadness or felt an unspoken pain in someone we barely knew, these instincts weren't merely accidents of our nature. They took genuine freedom. As a man grows older, they were divine whispers, pointing us toward a future crafted by the hands of a greater purpose. One of the most powerful examples of this divine preparation comes from the life of Jesus Christ. Throughout His time on earth, we see not only the miraculous and divine nature of His actions, but also the deep, unwavering empathy He held for the people He encountered. His acts of healing, willingness to listen, and endless compassion were not random. They were deliberate, a divine echo of a larger cosmic plan. Take, for instance, the well-known story of the Good Samaritan. In a world fractured by animosity, prejudice, and division, the Samaritan, a man from a community that the Jews despised, was the one who showed mercy to a wounded traveler, while others passed him by. Jesus didn't merely tell this story to encourage kindness. He used it as a profound illustration of what it meant to be attuned to the suffering of others, regardless of race, status, or background. The Samaritan's compassion was a divine expression of empathy, a reflection of God's love reaching beyond the confines of societal norms. Similarly, how Jesus reacted to the suffering of those around Him paints a picture of divine compassion in action. Whether He was moved to tears at the tomb of Lazarus or taking the time to heal a woman who had suffered for 12 years, He showed that true compassion isn't about quick fixes or shallow gestures. It is about deeply understanding another's pain and responding with the tenderness of a heart aligned with God's purpose. If we reflect on our own experiences, many of us can point to moments in our childhoods when we felt a deep concern for others. Perhaps it was a moment when we saw someone being bullied at school, or when we noticed a neighbor struggling in silence. As children, we might not have understood the full implications of these feelings, but they were still there, instinctual, raw, and genuine. These early expressions of empathy were not just signs of our emotional intelligence, they were part of a divine preparation. shaping our hearts for something greater. There's a passage in the Bible that beautifully encapsulates this idea. In the book of Jeremiah, God tells the prophet, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This speaks to the idea that our lives are not random, but formed and fashioned with intention. The compassion we felt in childhood, the deep sensitivity to the suffering of others, is not a coincidence. It is a sign that we are being prepared for a purpose far beyond our understanding. Jesus' life was a living example of divine compassion. He saw not just with his eyes, but with his heart. He understood the pain of a broken world because he had come to heal it. His empathy was not passive, it was active, compelling him to act, heal, comfort, and ultimately sacrifice himself for humanity's salvation. In our lives, we can look to these early experiences of compassion as signs that God is preparing us for a life of service. Perhaps you were the child who always tried to comfort a crying friend. Or maybe you were troubled by the injustices you saw. These weren't just fleeting moments. They were the first stirrings of a heart shaped to make a difference. As we grow, those moments of empathy can transform into more purposeful acts of compassion. We may not all be called to heal the sick or raise the dead as Jesus did, but we are all called to bring healing somehow through our words, actions, or presence. The divine compassion that Jesus modeled is not just a lofty ideal, but a blueprint for how we are meant to live. Let us not dismiss our early experiences of compassion as mere childhood innocence. They are in fact the seeds of divine purpose, planted in our hearts by the one who has known us from the very beginning. When we open our hearts to others and listen to the pain of the world around us, we participate in a much larger plan, one that stretches far beyond ourselves and into eternity. In embracing compassion, we are walking in the footsteps of the Savior, who lived his life with a heart that was always attuned to the suffering of others. And just as he used his life to heal and restore, we too are called instruments of divine compassion, bringing comfort and healing to a broken world. So, as we reflect on our journeys, let us remember those moments of childhood empathy, for they are the quiet beginnings of a much larger story, a story in which we too have a role to play, chosen for a divine purpose. In the quiet recesses of time, God knew you before the world was woven into its present form. This notion, so profound in its simplicity, is beautifully encapsulated in the words of the prophet Jeremiah. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." To think that the Creator who fashioned the stars and breathed life into the cosmos knew you before your existence took shape is both humbling and awe-inspiring. You are not an accident, nor a mere product of chance. Your life is part of a divine blueprint crafted with intention, and within that design lies a unique calling that only you can fulfill. The idea that each individual has been chosen for a specific purpose is not an isolated theme within the pages of Scripture. It is a thread that runs throughout the Bible, weaving its way through the lives of patriarchs, prophets, and ordinary people alike. The stories of these individuals speak to us across the centuries, revealing not only their struggles and triumphs, but also the truth that God, in his infinite wisdom, sets apart certain people for extraordinary tasks. And in the grand tapestry of history, each of us is a thread, purposefully and thoughtfully placed. Consider the story of Moses. Born in a time of great oppression, when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, Moses' early years were filled with uncertainty. He was set adrift on the Nile, saved by the hand of God, and raised in Pharaoh's palace. Yet, despite the privileges of royal life, God's plan for Moses was far greater than any earthly title could offer. At the burning bush, God revealed to Moses the specific mission for which he had been chosen: to lead the Israelites out of bondage. The circumstances of Moses' birth, his adoption, and his education were all orchestrated by God to prepare him for this pivotal role in history. He had been chosen, not because of his strength or ability, but because God had a divine purpose for him, one that would unfold in ways that Moses could not have imagined in his wildest dreams. Similarly, the story of David highlights the principle of divine selection. The youngest of 8 brothers, David was overlooked by his own family when the prophet Samuel came to anoint a new king over Israel. But God, who sees not as man sees, chose David. The Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. David was chosen not for his physical stature or impressive lineage, but because of his heart for God. His journey from shepherd boy to king of Israel is a testament to the idea that God's purposes are often realized unexpectedly and through unlikely people. And in this we are reminded that the world's standards do not determine our worth, but by the purpose that God has set for us. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, once a persecutor of Christians, provides another example of divine calling. On the road to Damascus, Paul encountered the risen Christ, and in that moment his life was forever changed. Christ spoke to him, saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Acts 9:04. Paul's transformation from enemy of the faith to one of its most ardent advocates illustrates the redemptive power of God's call. Paul's life was set apart for a mission to spread the gospel to the Gentiles, and though he faced countless trials, his purpose remained steadfast. His letters to the early churches continue to shape Christian doctrine today. Like Moses and David, Paul's story is one of divine selection, of being chosen for a purpose far beyond his understanding. But what about us? While we may not be in the same dramatic circumstances as Moses or Paul, we are no less chosen. Jeremiah's words are as much for us as they were for him. Before we were born, God knew us. He set us apart for a specific purpose. Perhaps we begin to understand the depth of our calling in the quiet acts of service, the moments of courage in the face of adversity, or the commitment to love and serve others. Acceptance and diversity are taken us humbly, but we should be grateful. Without them, no matter how seemingly insignificant, every life is precious in God's sight, and each has a role to play in His divine plan. We gain a profound sense of purpose and direction when we embrace the truth that we are chosen. We begin to see ourselves not as isolated individuals, but as part of a greater story, a story written by the hand of God, in which each of us plays a vital role. The knowledge that our existence is no accident, that we are not here by mere chance, brings us closer to understanding our true purpose. Like Moses, David, and Paul, we are called to step into the lives God has prepared for us, trusting that He who set us apart will equip us for the journey ahead. Divine dreams, the heavenly messages that shape our destiny. Throughout the Bible, we see how God speaks to His people unexpectedly, sometimes through the whispers of the heart, and at other times through the vivid dreams that awaken the spirit. Brimming with symbolic meaning, these dreams are more than mere reflections of the unconscious mind. They are divine messages that offer insight into God's grand design for our lives. Much like Joseph, who dreamt of his brothers bowing before him, or Daniel, whose visions revealed the rise and fall of empires, the dreams we experience may be the key to understanding our purpose and destiny in the eyes of God. The Bible is rich with examples of dreams that served as divine communication, guiding individuals towards their true calling or warning them of future trials. Consider the story of Joseph in Genesis. As a young man, Joseph was gifted with dreams that foretold his future prominence, dreams that caused his brothers to loathe him. Yet, these dreams were not mere fantasy, they were prophetic visions from God, revealing a destiny far beyond the ordinary. Joseph's dreams were not understood in his youth, but through years of hardship and perseverance they came to fruition in a way that only God could have orchestrated. In his rise to power in Egypt, Joseph became not just a ruler, but a savior to his family and a figure in God's larger plan for the salvation of His people. Similarly, Daniel's dreams and visions were not only prophetic, but they were also deeply symbolic, showing the mighty hand of God in history. When King Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream, only Daniel, through divine revelation, was able to interpret it. This vision revealed the future kingdoms that would rise and fall, and it was a reminder that despite the shifting powers of this world, God's eternal reign is unwavering. Daniel's ability to interpret these dreams gave him prominence, bringing him closer to understanding God's vast, unchanging purpose. These biblical stories invite us to consider the significance of our dreams. Perhaps you have experienced a dream that left you with a profound sense of purpose, or an uncanny feeling that you had glimpsed something far greater than yourself. Such dreams may not always be as dramatic as Joseph's, but they could be just as meaningful. Dreams often carry a weight of symbolism, a language of the soul that can only be fully understood when we seek God's guidance. If you are ever troubled by a dream that seems to speak to your spirit, it is worth stepping back and asking God for understanding. Just as Joseph and Daniel sought God's wisdom, we can also pray to Him when our dreams seem to have a message. The dream of a small child may hold the seeds of a future ministry, or the vision of a great storm might warn of a trial to come. There is no dream too small, no vision too insignificant for God to use to speak to His children. However, not all dreams are prophetic in nature. Some are simply the natural outpourings of our thoughts and emotions, shaped by the events of our daily lives. Yet even in these, we must be discerning. In times of peace, God may speak through dreams that offer comfort and reassurance. In times of trial, He may send visions that provide insight into the path we must walk or the courage we must summon. Whether prophetic or simply reflective, dreams can play a role in deepening our relationship with God. The Apostle Paul, in his letters, frequently urged Christians to live in the light of God's calling. And it is through dreams that some of us may receive a glimpse of what that calling might be. A vision visited Paul during the night when a Macedonian man appeared, begging him to come and preach the gospel in their land. This dream led to a pivotal moment in the early church, where Paul's missionary journeys took a new direction. Like Joseph, Daniel, and Paul, our dreams are invitations to partner with God in His divine work. They are not to be dismissed lightly or seen as mere happenstance. When we listen carefully and seek God's understanding, we open ourselves to the possibility that our dreams may be the keys to unlocking a greater purpose. Whether waking or sleeping, each dream may be part of a much larger narrative, woven together by a God who knows the end from the beginning. In conclusion, we are reminded that God, who spoke to His people through dreams in ancient times, still speaks to us in this way today. If you find yourself with a dream that resonates deeply within your soul, reflect on it, pray about it, and seek God's interpretation. Dreams are not just fleeting images or fragments of the subconscious. They can be divine messages that guide us along our spiritual journey, revealing glimpses of the future and leading us toward our destiny in Christ. Just as the dreams of Joseph, Daniel, and Paul shaped their lives and destinies, so too can our dreams shape ours, if we are willing to listen and follow where God leads. God's preparation, the shaping of a soul. Life is full of hardships, trials, and moments of struggle that seem too great to bear. We all face moments when the world's weight presses down on us, when everything feels like it's falling apart. But what if, instead of viewing these challenges as obstacles, we saw them as part of a divine plan? What if every difficulty, every painful moment, was not intended to break us, but to prepare us for something greater? This is the message in the Scriptures, that God's preparation often takes the form of hardship, but this hardship is never in vain. In the book of Job, we encounter a man who faced unimaginable suffering. Job lost his wealth, his health, and his family. He was stripped of everything. Yet during his pain, he did not curse God. Instead, he questioned and wrestled with his circumstances, but never abandoned his faith. His story is one of resilience, but it is also one of preparation. It's a story of destruction, but he kept faith. The final proof is that the God inscription on the harvested flocks avails even through his suffering. Job's character was refined, his understanding of God deepened, and in the end, God restored him to greater blessings than before. Job's suffering was not meaningless. It was a process of preparation that made him into a man fit for a greater purpose. This concept of suffering as preparation is echoed throughout the Bible. In the New Testament, we see this same truth in the life of Jesus Christ. Christ's mission was not simply to preach and heal. He was called to die for the sins of humanity. But before he could fulfill this purpose, he had to undergo intense preparation. In the wilderness, he fasted and prayed for 40 days, facing temptation from Satan himself. But it was during this time of solitude and testing, Jesus was strengthened for his ultimate mission. The Gospels tell us that Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, Luke 4:01. a reminder that even our darkest moments can be used by God to prepare us for His calling. Similarly, in the life of the Apostle Paul, we see a man constantly being shaped and refined by God. Before his conversion on the road to Damascus, Paul was a persecutor of Christians, zealous in his opposition to the gospel. But after his encounter with Christ, he was called to be the greatest missionary the world has ever known. Yet Paul's ministry was marked by hardship and suffering. He was imprisoned, beaten, shipwrecked, and faced opposition at every turn. Yet, in his letters, Paul writes not of despair, but of joy, strength, and perseverance. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Romans 8 verse 18. Paul understood that the difficulties he faced were not random. They were part of God's plan to prepare him for the great work ahead. The message is clear. Every struggle, every trial, every difficulty you face is part of God's preparation. These experiences, difficult as they may seem, are opportunities for growth and transformation. Like gold refined in the fire, your character is being shaped and strengthened. God does not send trials to harm you, but to mold you into the person you are meant to be. In the same way that an athlete must endure hours of grueling training to be ready for competition, we too must undergo the refining process God uses to prepare us for our mission. This preparation is not always easy. There are times when we feel overwhelmed, when we question God's purpose in our pain. But even in those moments of doubt, we can trust that God is working behind the scenes. He sees the bigger picture and knows what we need to become who He has called us to be. In Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9, God reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." What we see as a setback or a moment of defeat may be vital to our spiritual growth. The key then is to trust in God's process. Even when the road ahead seems unclear, we can confidently believe God is at work. Each challenge we face, each moment of struggle, is an opportunity to grow in faith and strength. In these moments, we are prepared for the great calling God has placed on our lives. The trials we endure today are not just for our benefit, they are part of the preparation for the greater purpose God has in store for us. Ultimately, our struggles will not define us, but how we respond to them will. Will we trust God's preparation, even when the path is hard to walk? Will we allow our difficulties to refine our character and draw us closer to the God who calls us to His higher purpose? Remember the words of James 1:2-4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. The divine gift of truth. In a world where deception often runs rampant and right and wrong seem to blur into indistinct shades, there is a gift bestowed by God that grants a sharp discernment of truth. A gift that empowers the soul to see through falsehoods and stand steadfastly for what is right. This divine gift is not a trivial matter, but a beacon of light in a world that often prefers the shadows of compromise. It is the ability to recognize dishonesty and injustice, to detect the subtle distortions of truth that many turn a blind eye to, and to remain unwavering in our commitment to uphold integrity. This gift of sensitivity to truth, of moral clarity, is not born from human effort alone. It is divine in origin, part of the profound ways in which God equips His followers to lead, to govern, and to guide. In the grand tapestry of the biblical story, we find examples of men and women who were given this heightened sensitivity, not merely as a talent or skill, but as a divine tool to stand as instruments of God's righteousness in a fallen world. One such figure is Daniel the prophet. In King Nebuchadnezzar's court, Daniel was recognized for his wisdom and ability to discern the truth when the king's counselors failed. When the king sought someone to interpret his dream, a dream that none could understand, Daniel, relying on God's revelation, could discern the truth that others could not see. This wasn't just a display of intelligence, but of a profound connection with God, a divine clarity that illuminated the path of truth. In Daniel's case, it was not just about interpreting a dream, it was about standing firm in righteousness in a foreign land, where the pressures of conformity were ever present. Jesus, the ultimate embodiment of truth, offers the clearest picture of what it means to live with an unwavering commitment to the truth. His life was a testament to the ultimate discernment of right and wrong. Throughout his ministry, he encountered deceit, false accusations, and injustice, yet he remained steadfast. When confronted by the Pharisees, who sought to entrap him with their questions, he did not falter. He made the decision to overlook the cautious advice of the world, even to accept some doubtful cases as tempting the prophet to commit crime. If crime did not kill him, he spoke with authority, not because of his wisdom alone, but because he embodied divine truth. His words were not merely reflections of human knowledge, but revelations from the Father, meant to guide his followers into all truth. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he declared in John 14:6, affirming that truth is not a concept, but a person, God himself. It is through Christ that we understand that the ability to discern truth is not an end in itself, it is a means to a greater end, living by God's will and leading others toward the same. The Apostle Paul, in his letters to the early churches, often spoke of the importance of truth in the life of a believer. In Ephesians 6:14, he speaks of putting on the belt of truth as part of the armor of God, a vital piece that equips the believer to stand firm against the forces of evil. Truth, Paul asserts, is not just something we recognize, but something we wear as part of our spiritual armor. This divine gift, to discern right from wrong, is not just for the leaders or the prophets of old. It is for each of us who call ourselves followers of Christ. God has given us His Holy Spirit, who leads us into all truth. The Spirit convicts us when we stray from the path of righteousness, guiding us back to the straight and narrow. This divine sensitivity is not only for moments of great decision or leadership, but for every day, when faced with the small compromises, the half-truths, and the whispers that call us to ignore the right way. In today's world, where truth is often sacrificed for convenience, popularity, or gain, we are called to stand as beacons of God's light. We are called to be the ones who detect falsehoods, who uphold justice, and who discern the right path, even when it is not the easiest or most popular one. This sensitivity to truth is not merely a moral attribute, it is a divine empowerment, a spiritual gift that helps us to align ourselves with God's will and to live lives that reflect His righteousness. As we navigate the complexities of our lives, we must remember the words of Psalm 25:05. "Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long." This is the heart of the believer's journey, discovering and living in the truth that sets us free, a truth that stands unshaken even in the face of a world that often rejects it. The call to leadership, a divine preparation. From a young age, many of us find ourselves thrust into positions of responsibility. Whether it's leading a team, managing a project, or guiding others in times of difficulty, it may seem as though we are chosen for these tasks without fully understanding why. Yet, when we look to the Bible, we see a deeper truth emerging. God often prepares His chosen leaders from a tender age. This preparation is not about power or prestige. It is about service, humility, and a willingness to positively impact others. Take, for example, the story of David, the shepherd boy who would one day become king. In 1 Samuel 16, God sends the prophet Samuel to anoint one of the sons of Jesse as the future king of Israel. When Samuel meets David, he is the youngest of all the brothers, working quietly in the fields. To the untrained eye, David might seem insignificant compared to his older brothers, strong, mature, and more suited for the royal crown. But God sees beyond the surface. He knew that though young and inexperienced, David possessed a heart after God's own. David's early life was filled with responsibility, albeit modest. As a shepherd, he protected his flock from wild animals, and in doing so, he demonstrated courage, trust in God, and a deep sense of care for those under his charge. These were qualities that God would later use to equip him for leadership. The humble life of a shepherd was no accident. It was God's training ground, where David learned to rely on God's strength and guidance. His battles with lions and bears in the fields were not just physical challenges, but spiritual lessons in trust, perseverance, and faith. In the same way, God prepares us for leadership not through the accumulation of power or wealth, but through the cultivation of our hearts. Leadership in God's eyes is not about controlling others, but about serving them. Jesus exemplified this perfectly when he washed his disciples' feet, demonstrating that true leadership involves humility and a heart to serve, not to be served. In Matthew 20:26-28, Jesus tells his disciples, "Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave." Consider also the story of Moses, a man entrusted with one of the most significant leadership roles in the Bible. From a baby in a basket floating down the Nile to a prince of Egypt, Moses' life was a preparation for the monumental task of leading the Israelites out of slavery. Yet before Moses could fulfill this purpose, God had to prepare him. For years, Moses lived as a shepherd, tending to the flock in the desert. During these years, Moses learned the lessons of patience, endurance, and how to listen to the voice of God. God's calling on Moses wasn't about showcasing his strength or brilliance. It was about shaping a leader who would rely on divine wisdom and act with justice, compassion, and humility. An authoritarian stance didn't mark Moses' leadership, but by his deep connection with God. He didn't approach his task alone, but continuously sought God's guidance. In Exodus 33:14, God assures Moses, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Even in moments of doubt, Moses could lead because he understood that his strength came not from his ability, but from God's constant presence. These stories of David and Moses show us that leadership is never about having power or authority for the sake of influence. Instead, it is a divine calling to make a difference in the lives of others. When entrusted with responsibility, whether early or late in life, it is an invitation from God to step into a role that requires faithfulness, integrity, and service. God has been preparing us all along, molding our character and abilities through our circumstances and challenges. As young people, we may not be ready for the responsibilities that come our way. Yet, in the eyes of God, each task, no matter how small it may seem, is part of a larger plan to shape us into the leaders He intends us to be. When entrusted with responsibility, it reminds us that God has already worked in our lives, preparing us for what lies ahead. Ultimately, true leadership is not about recognition or praise, but about fulfilling the calling that God has placed on our lives. As we embrace this calling, we must remember that the greatest leaders serve others with a heart of love and humility. In the words of Jesus, "The greatest among you will be your servant," Matthew 23:11. We are all called to lead in this way, following in the footsteps of those who from a young age learned to serve and guide others with faith and humility. So, when entrusted with responsibility in the workplace, community, or family, remember that it is God's preparation for something greater. Embrace the challenges, trust in His guidance, and lead with a heart of service. In doing so, you will fulfill the divine purpose for which you were created. Number 12, the divine calling, a journey beyond the ordinary. In the quiet corners of our lives, where the world's noise fades away, there comes a whisper, soft and gentle, but powerful enough to stir the soul. This is the divine call, an invitation to step beyond the ordinary and embrace something far greater than we could ever imagine. It is a call that transcends the mundane and beckons us to discover our true purpose, a purpose designed by the Creator Himself. The divine calling is not a loud command, but a subtle stirring of the heart, a sudden realization that we were made for something extraordinary. The Bible contains stories of men and women who heard this call. It is often in moments of stillness, when the distractions of life fall away, that God's voice becomes clear. Take, for example, the story of Moses. A humble shepherd, Moses was tending his flock on the mountainside when the Lord appeared to him as a burning bush. At first, Moses was hesitant. He questioned why he, a mere shepherd, should be called to deliver the Israelites from the oppression of Egypt. But God's call was not based on Moses' qualifications, but on God's sovereign plan. In that moment, Moses was not just a shepherd, he was being invited into a purpose far greater than anything he had known. This divine call is often accompanied by doubt and fear. We are reminded of our inadequacies when God calls us to something greater. Just as Moses felt unworthy, so too do we. But it is in this very moment of doubt that God's grace shines the brightest. The call is not about what we can do on our own, but what God can accomplish through us. He doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. In the New Testament, we see another example of this divine calling through the life of Peter. A fisherman by trade, Peter was called by Jesus to follow him. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, and Peter left everything behind to walk in the footsteps of the Savior. Peter's response was immediate, yet he had no idea what would unfold before him. The call of Jesus transformed his life, taking him from the waters of Galilee to the very heart of the early church. Peter's journey was not without failure. He denied Christ 3 times, yet Jesus restored him, calling him once again to lead his people. Peter's story reminds us that the divine call is not contingent upon our perfection, but upon God's mercy and grace. But what does this call look like in our lives today? How can we hear God's invitation in a world filled with distractions and voices pulling us in every direction? The divine call may not come in the form of a burning bush or a voice from the heavens, but it comes all the same. Living out the divine calling requires courage and faith. It requires us to step away from the comfort of the known and venture into the unknown. It may require sacrifices as we leave behind our plans and dreams in favor of God's greater purpose. But the reward is immeasurable. We discover that we were made for something extraordinary as we step into the call. We live with a purpose, each day unfolding with intention and meaning. We are no longer wandering through life aimlessly, but walking with God, fulfilling the purpose for which we were created. Jesus himself knew the power of the divine call. When he walked the earth, he called others to follow him, to live in the fullness of God's kingdom. His call was not mere words, it was a call to transformation. When we accept the divine call, we are not just doing something for God, we are becoming more than we ever imagined. We are becoming the people he designed us to be. In the book of Jeremiah, God speaks of his divine calling over our lives. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This verse reminds us that God's call is not random, it is intentional and personal. From the beginning, he knew us and had a purpose for us. His divine call is an invitation to step into that purpose and live a life that reflects his glory and love. Let your life be for you like that. As God reveals the purpose in his word, the divine call is not just for the great heroes of the Bible, it is for each of us, a call to live with intention, walk in the footsteps of Jesus, and fulfill the unique purpose that God has set before us. We discover we were made for more than the ordinary when we answer that call. We were made for something extraordinary, something divine. So, listen carefully. The divine call is waiting, and it will transform your life forever. Will you step into the purpose for which you were created and live out the extraordinary life God has designed for you?